7:30, and I am calling this meeting of the Highland Park Zoning Board to order. The first item on the agenda is statement of compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, which I will read now. Annual notice of this meeting was provided to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Highland Park Planet on January 31st, 2023. In addition, notice of this meeting via Zoom was emailed to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Highland Park Planet on October 16th, 2023, and was posted on the borough website at www.highlandparkhpborough.com and on the bulletin board at Borough Hall, 221 South 5th Avenue, Highland Park, New Jersey, and has remained continuously posted as required by law. Fire exits are to the left and right of council chambers. If anyone is speaking, please speak into the microphone so the recording system can capture you. All right, so now we will do roll call. Would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Mr. Fetchner?
Present.
Mr. Pheasant?
Present.
Mr. Hofer?
Present.
Mr. Hosefeld?
Present.
Ms. Corbin?
Present.
Mr. Rosner?
Present.
Mr. Rothenberg? Mr. Winfrey?
Here.
Mr. Roger Thomas?
Here.
Mr. Chris Cosenza?
Here.
Mr. Bruce Hutch?
Who's not present tonight? Anyone from the public? I don't know if they don't have to announce themselves on their own too. So, all right. So let's see, motions of adjournment of any scheduled cases and other motions. We don't have any.
Nothing.
There's been no applications all year. And so we're just gonna zip along. I guess public comment not related to pending applications. Is there anyone online that wants to speak about something to the zoning board?
So I forgot we were sort of online.
Going once, going twice. All right, that's done. Unfinished or adjourned hearings, there aren't any. Hearing of new cases. Approval of minutes, there aren't any minutes. And so there's no resolutions. So correspondence and reports, I guess this is where the action is going to be tonight. And I guess we all received a memo today, and the purpose of the meeting in my mind, even though we don't have anything, any applicants, I wanted to get together as a board, just kind of discuss our purpose, given that it's been almost 2 years with very little applications. And we, if all of us are eager to sort of be volunteers in the town, we're not really getting that opportunity. On the other hand, you know, we have costs to run the board, not significant ones when there's not a lot of applications, but there still is, you know, some fees. And there is an alternative where we got a memo today from Roger Thomas about an option where we could actually merge with the planning board and become a single land use board in town. Now there's a population threshold below which it's easier to do that. And apparently we just tip above that population threshold. So Roger Thomas, you want to give us a speak through on this?
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. About 15 years ago, there was a sort of a push, I would say that was about right, to have various towns go from where the planning and the zoning board to what is euphemistically called a land use board. There's no such thing as a land use board that you'll find in the municipal land use law. It's a creation of either lawyers or planners. I don't know where the term came from, but whatever. But that's generally what everybody refers to. And what it really boils down to is a planning board that assumes the responsibility of the zoning board of adjustment. It's simply that, nothing more. Now, under this municipal land use law, section 25, there was a reference to the fact that a municipality can change the planning and the zoning board format into a singular board, and we'll call it the land use board. And as the chair has indicated, and through our obviously very capable planner, he was good enough to check the population figures for 2020 and found that as of that time, there are 15,072 people. Why is that significant? It's significant because under the municipal land use law, any municipality under the population of 15,000 can end up deciding to have a land use board occur simply by passing an ordinance, and that takes care of that. If you are over 15,000, and you are by 72 people, it's probably more than that, but whatever. The bottom line is you're no longer eligible for that simple mathematical or that method. Rather, what you are required to do, not you, but the governing body is required to do, is to, if they choose to do it, pass an ordinance, but it also has to be done through a voter referendum, which means that it would be the voter referendum first, and then ultimately, if it was passed, then it would end up going into an ordinance and then consolidated. So what are the advantages and disadvantages? And that's really a background to let you know that the governing body has to make a decision as to whether or not they want to go that route. Most towns that I represent are generally under 15,000, and therefore those that have gone to a land use board have done it by ordinance. And it has been, they've done it for various reasons. Some of them good, some of them bad, but the fact of the matter is they have done it because it's a relatively easy process and it's only the ordinance. When you have to deal with the public, and a public like Highland Park, which is very active, you're going to get a lot of activity, and I don't know whether or not they're going to be wanting to go that route, but that's up to them. That's not a decision that you guys can make. So what are the advantages and disadvantages? It depends. The typical lawyer answer. It depends on the facts of a particular municipality. If it turns out, and I taught this course at the League of Municipalities, like I said, 15 years ago, when everybody was doing it. Everybody thought, well, the best thing of all is going to be saving money. Well, maybe, and maybe not, because what ends up happening is that invariably, what happens is you're taking one meeting a month for the planning board and one meeting a month for the zoning board of adjustment. And if you have relatively active boards, the likelihood is that you're going to end up finding that if you combine the boards and only assign one meeting a month, you may get overwhelmed, and therefore you're going to end up going back to the same 2 meetings a month that you had originally. And that means that instead of having 2 meetings with the 2 boards, you're going to have 2 meetings with the land use board. You're still going to have the attorney there. You're still going to end up having the planner there. You're still going to have the engineer there, and you're still going to have all the fees. Well, and the fees aren't going to change one iota because it's not being paid. These fees, escrow fees, etc., are not being paid by the taxpayers of the municipality. As you know, they're being paid by the developer. So it really has no bearing upon the fees that are paid by the applicant. The applicant's going to pay them no matter what, whether you have a land use board, a planning board, or a zoning board of adjustment. So the issue, in my mind, is really not so much necessarily of whether or not you're going to end up saving money. It's possible that you may save money in a town like Highland Park, parenthetically, because, as the chair has said, you haven't had an application in a year. And quite frankly, there hasn't been an awful lot of activity at the planning board in the last year. There's been a couple of meetings, but that's about it. So the idea of combining the boards into one board, it's, at least at the moment, it's probably okay that you'll end up having only one meeting as opposed to 2 meetings. But the reality is that you're not really having a board of adjustment meeting. You haven't had one this year at all. So you're not spending any money. I can't remember the last time I sent a bill to Highland Park for the zoning board of adjustment. And I assume the same is true with regard to Chris, and I suspect it's also true with regard to Bruce. So again, you are going down to one meeting, and that's probably good enough for the time being, but you're also not spending any money now, even though you have 2 boards for obvious reasons. Excuse me. So the question becomes, what's the benefit? If you have a community where you're having to cancel meetings because you're not getting members to show up, or alternatively, you're having a problem getting members to volunteer, then I think that becomes a significant problem. And then the land use board format is much better because, as you know, excuse me, the zoning board of adjustment under the statute requires 7 active members or regular members, and then you have 4 alternate members. So you now have 11 members there And then a planning board can either be 7 or 9, but most towns now have a 9-member board with 4 alternates. So now you have 13. So the combination, you have a number of people. And if you can't get those people, it can be a problem. It can be embarrassing for the town if you have to cancel meetings because you don't have a quorum. And that has happened in some of the towns that I've represented over the last number of years that I've been doing this work. So if you have that kind of a town, then it's a benefit in my mind to doing the consolidation. Conversely, if you have a town where you don't have that problem, where you have people who are willing to volunteer and are not only willing to volunteer, but are willing to show up and do the work that is necessary in terms of reviewing the applications and being at the meetings and making comments and participating and voting and all the things that you guys know have to be done. If you have all those people, as I've indicated, you end up having what amounts to a combination of people that goes from 2 boards, which if my math is correct, is like 24 or 25 people, down to a single board, which is 13. And then if it turns out you have both boards are fully staffed, so to speak, with volunteer members, somebody's not going to be on the board. And therefore, it's up to the mayor most of the time. Sometimes it's not the mayor, but let's assume for our purposes, it's the mayor. It's up to the mayor to make the determination as to who's going to stay and who's not. That's always a politically charged decision. So therefore, those are sort of the other side of it. That's kind of really the elements that I can discuss that involve, in my estimation, the advantages and the disadvantages of a planning and zoning board versus a land use board. Yes, sir.
Well, I have a question.
Absolutely.
So if Highland Park were to go to a land use board and later we at some point realize we want to split them back out, there's a procedure for that?
Yep, and it's just doing the same thing that you did before, but then you have to go back because at that point, presumably, you still have the population in excess of 15,000, so you're still going to have to go through the voter referendum process, as well as the ordinance. So the answer is you're not bound forever and ever and ever if you make the decision, but you still have to go through whatever the process was in reverse. So if you're a town that's under 15,000 and for whatever reason it seems as though it's not working so well, and the governing body decides they want to go back to the original format, which is the planning and zoning board, they then have the right to simply amend the ordinance or pass a new ordinance, which is what I would prefer, pass a new ordinance that indicates that the ordinance is now negating ordinance 2023-7, which is the one that created the land use board, and then recreate, the 2 boards. So it would be done that way. In your case, it would have to be a combination of that ordinance together with a voter referendum that agrees to it.
And so the council will decide if they want to do it, and it goes to popular vote in a full election of
The council would have to authorize a referendum.
and we
Yes.
go to full vote of the.
Full vote of the entire town. Yep.
And when does that vote take place? Is it only when normal voting happens in November, or is it could be at any time?
That's unclear. I would think that most towns, well, there's also some political considerations that will be coming into play. But if you put that aside, elections are costly. And given the fact that it's an election involving the full town, it's my understanding that even in small towns, it's going to cost $15,000 to $20,000 to run an election. It is what it is. So therefore, it would seem to me that if you do a special election, which is certainly the council certainly has the right to do, they can do that. And then you have a whole series of different things that deals with the political aspect of it. Do you then dare to have a special election, which by themselves is one of those things where virtually nobody knows about it, nobody cares about it, and it suddenly becomes a political football? And how dare you sneak one of these things through? And then there's the cost involved, independent of the political component. So it would seem to me it would make more sense that if you're going to do that, you would do that at a general election. You know, you could do it, I would assume, you have elections throughout the course of the year. You have the general election, you have primaries. You could probably fit it into one that's already ongoing. Yes.
If we were to simply include the question during the general election, what would the additional cost be to the town? De minimis?
Well, the answer is I don't know, but I would think it would be virtually nothing. I mean, the idea of adding a statement to the ballot, I can't imagine it's virtually negligible. I would think it's negligible. So running its own election is where the cost is. The fact that you're running a general election to elect I don't honestly know. Do you elect the mayor?
Yes.
Okay, so you would have the general election electing the mayor and the council, and then added to that, you would just simply add the question, you know, do you want to have a combined board from the planning and zoning board to a land use board with an explanatory statement at the end? Somebody's going to write that, but that's not very costly. Yeah.
I understand that you haven't sent a bill for the zoning board in recent memory. But what does the zoning board with no activity cost the taxpayers of our
Nothing.
town?
Nothing.
We don't have to pay Sonia?
Oh, I'm sorry. So yeah, I
She works for
apologize.
free.
She will get paid, and I'm a little fuzzy on this kind of thing, because I don't get involved in other people's pay. But, you know, if it turns out that you have a board secretary, that board secretary, it looks like that's true here. You don't have a board secretary, two different board secretaries, one for the planning and one for the zoning. You have one board secretary, hopefully. And that board secretary is then going to end up having a salary. And the salary is going to be an annual salary. There are some towns that will give an annual salary because it's a part-time job on a relatively low side. And then I guess it's called a stipend per appearance. Now, I don't know how Highland Park does it. So the reality is that, you know, for each meeting that you have, is there a cost? The answer is yes, because the likelihood is that you're going to end up having a meeting, not only is Sonia going to show up, but you're likely going to be stuck with at least me and potentially either Chris or Bruce.
And we have to advertise the meeting.
And you advertise the meetings. And the meetings, again, that cost is borne, luckily, it is not a regular recurring cost because the meetings are set at the beginning of the year. So you set the entire agenda in a January notice in the paper, and it takes into account the entire year's worth of meetings, and all the dates are set, and the location is set, and the time is set, and that's it. The only other notices that have to occur is that if there are special meetings that occur during the course of the year, then you have to do an additional notice.
So if we were to be voted out of existence, there would be no significant savings to the town.
Correct.
And if we continued as we are, the savings are borne by the applicants, or the costs.
The cost, yeah, generally speaking, the costs are borne by the applicant. You'll notice there's no applicant today. So whatever your budget is for 2023, the fact that I'm here and the fact that Chris is here, there will be a bill now, and it will be sent to I guess it will be sent to Sonia or Jen. I'm not sure who handles the billing in Highland Park, but there will be a bill when there's no other applicant and there's just general business that then gets taken out of the general budget for your board. But most of the time there's applications, and therefore it gets charged to the applicant.
Wolfram has some
I
questions.
have two, like one question and one comment. The question is the purpose of the meeting today, because you don't need to ask us, right? This is a decision by the town to make that decision. So I would assume why I'm here, why I'm showing up today, is to say, is it possible that we make a statement or express an opinion?
Well, I'll leave that to the chair.
That is one of the reasons I wanted to get together, because I have sort of spoken to some of you sort of offline and, informally, just to And, there's just feelings and I haven't had a chance to get the whole board together and talk about this. So I wanted to take the opportunity to kind of poll everybody's thoughts on this issue. And then exactly that, we would, if the board feels strongly one way, or if the board feels strongly that maybe we should ask the town to consider doing one, we would do that. If the board feels strongly that the status quo sort of makes sense, then we'll just carry on. But we can at least say that, hey, we thought about this and we thought about the pros and cons and we decided that the current status quo makes the most sense. And so I think that, either way, it's still valid that we got together and talked about it and then we have something to present up to the council. So that was the purpose of it.
So then I will throw in my 2 cents. So one thing is I've done this, I believe, for around 15 years now. And it's fine, like I don't have to do it, right? I think with the things that I wanted to do, I put my service to the town and that is fine. So from that notion of, do we get dissolved or not, right? I think there's other things one can do and do a service, that's fine. On the other hand, what I'm personally thinking is, if we have places like Highland Cliffs on those big investments, the zoning board, the planning board can do that if, for heaven's sake, if they want to. The thing is, we had so many cases of a homeowner who wanted to have an extra room for the in-laws or a deck expansion, those kind of things. And my impression is that the level of, let's say, formality for the applicant is probably lower here than in the planning board. That's I don't know. But my thing is that these are things that we care of, like this is more. I have the impression we dealt with those things in a very positive neighborly way, and that is a quality that I don't want to miss, and that would be my 2 cents of continuing, because it's about these little things that are not big political issues, but like little things that we can deal with in this group. That's my 2 cents.
All right, I guess I would, well, first of all, any other board comments, and then I wanted to bounce the question to.
Yeah, I just,
You'll go second.
it would seem that if our best projection of future activity was that it was going to be at a sustained low level of activity, that could be a basis for arguing we don't need all this capacity that's sitting in 2 boards. But I don't know that we have the ability to make such a projection. And in the absence of that, there could be an unknown level of activity where we will lose considerable capacity if we do merge.
That's a fair point.
I have 2 questions.
But Mr. Wimpy was, and then we'll go to.
I hadn't heard a particularly strong case for, I don't know what you call it, merging the 2 boards. So if this was put onto a referendum, we'd have a hard time explaining why it's been put up as a referendum and why we would want people to vote one way or another on the issue. In which case, why?
Yeah, that's a fair
And
point.
in fact, people might, out in the town might think there's some sort of murky secret reason why this is happening.
That sometimes occurs. As a matter of fact, it did occur in one particular town that I know of, closer to my home, and they passed. It was a small town, so they passed the ordinance, and there was a lot of concern about the fact that this was a brainchild of the mayor, who, for no good reason, wanted to get rid of some people on some of the boards, and therefore this was a way of doing it. And that became a political football, and that land use board lasted 1 year. And then the political pressure was such that they reversed it after a year. So those things can happen.
So I guess one question is it possible that there could be a conflict with one board? Because I feel like there have been times when the planning board has approved plans, and then I guess in the process of, construction, things have come up that then have come to the zoning board. But now they'd be going back to the very board that just approved the original plans.
The answer is no, there would be no conflict, because they would have power. That board would have the power to do both. Should there have been, hopefully that doesn't happen very often, but the fact of the matter is there is a statutory distinction between the boards. Generally speaking, the planning board is responsible for certain things that involve site plan and subdivision work. As you know, you are also, so long as you have a site plan or subdivision attached, you do have the right to act upon a C variance, a bulk variance, setbacks and front yards and all that sort of thing. Under no circumstances does the planning board have the right to act upon a D variance, which is a use variance involving things that are not otherwise permitted in the zone, pre-existing non-conforming uses, height variances, conditional use variances, things of that nature. That is reserved specifically for the zoning board of adjustment, and it is a higher standard, not only in terms of the legal standard, but also in terms of the method of voting, because you only have 7 members as opposed to a 9-member board, and you are required to get 5 affirmative votes. So these are all things that you know, but the planning, and I find sometimes that the planning board takes a little bit of time to get used to the idea of dealing with D variances as compared to what you guys do. You do it, that's what you do, so to speak. But by the way, they do adapt over a period of time.
Let me, before we go, I wanted to just address one point and ask Chris to weigh in. On the point that Wolfram made about the formality level, I wouldn't think there'd be a difference,
Really?
because I think
Okay,
I think the process is pretty much the same.
It is.
And
Okay.
so the application forms, the fees, all that's basically the same. The whole idea of coming with experts, if you're a corporation or even if you're not, you have to put on a case. So I think that's pretty much the same. I just wanted to see if Mr. Condon, if you agree with that, and if you actually had any other thoughts, if you've seen a town grapple with this question and what your thoughts are.
Well, from my experience, I only represented one other town, I'm touching currently, and I did work in Princeton for a while. They both had separate boards. As to the question on the formality, it's the same process as you described. Although when dealing with D variances, you have a greater burden of proof on those particular applications. But in terms of the process, I find both the planning board and zoning board to be very engaging, very intelligent board in this town. I would view them positively in both lights, in my experience for the past 6 years. As far as I guess you're looking for commentary as whether to recommend.
Just your thoughts generally, like if you had, if you have any opinions on.
Well, I've been in a position where we hardly meet, where I'm a zoning board member in my town, East Windsor, and I've met maybe once or twice in the past 3 or 4 years. And it's generally just to do reorganization.
Yeah.
So I've been in that position before, but in terms of the workload, obviously you can't predict. I think part of it's because I think it's fair to say the form-based code has some role in that, as we have eliminated variances. Really for small things that I think this board has said over the years, why are we here? So try to make it easier to do work in town. Also, the real estate market's changing, interest rates are higher. I think there's hesitance to do any type of construction, whether that's redevelopment or an addition to a house. So that's a natural ebb and flow of the market. That doesn't mean that it's going to stay this way for several years. We might have a few cases next year. We just don't know. I do expect over the next few years, things will pick up. We are doing a lot of work downtown and redevelopment planning, and I have a feeling that that may also trigger interest in town to make improvements to properties, build new homes, which has rarely happened unless it's part of a subdivision. So it's I would say as part of the ebbs and flow, I'm not sure it would be frankly worth going through the effort of merging the boards. To get 2 different personalities, and we're just in a natural lull, but if we can revisit in a year or 2.
I think based on the comments you made early on, it's like, if you have a town that you have trouble getting volunteers and people aren't interested or not showing up, that's not our case.
No.
We have an active town, we have like active volunteers, we have people who care and really want to contribute. So I think for that, if that's the benefit you're trying to achieve, we don't need that. And so I'm just going to say my personal opinion is it seems like the status quo makes a heck of a lot of sense. We're not really going to save money if we're not spending money when there's no applications, and we're only getting together maybe once a year, January, if there's no other things to to reorganize, and that seems like a reasonable investment to keep the flexibility of having two different boards, even though we don't do a lot. If we don't need to meet, we won't meet.
I'm all in favor of a summer cookout. I mean, it's just a thought.
But so it's my thinking after going through this discussion is that it probably makes sense, at least my opinion is to keep it the way it is. But you know, I'd like to see if anyone has different thoughts and.
You know, I have advocated for combining the boards, you know, in the past because I thought there was a savings. You know, I know for a lot of our seniors in town, the property tax bill, it means a lot, you know, to be able to stay in their homes. But with no savings, I think we are a much more approachable board than the planning board. Enjoy, you know, helping people with their houses, so status quo is good by me.
Yeah, I would just like to repeat, yes, some things that other people have said. I mean, the question for me was the cost. Is there cost savings? But if there really isn't, if it's de minimis, then the most salient point to me is that I've been on this board for a long time, and I think we've always been able to make quorum. We've never had a case where everybody go home, there's not enough of this. So that right there is evidence enough for me. Just if it's not broke, don't try to fix it.
That's it. Any other thoughts? I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I think it makes sense to, I just like the flexibility and the point I had made early on about like some of us, if you're really eager to volunteer and you're not getting your fair share of it on this board, well, there's other opportunities too. And so, you know, just because you're on this board doesn't mean you can't do more in town. So I would think that, you know, it seems like we're all kind of, I guess, in agreement that we'll keep the board going. We'll meet when we need to, and we won't when we don't need to. So thank you all for entertaining the discussion. And wait,
Don't we have to have a, do we vote on Sonia or we don't?
Oh, yes.
Oh, we have to vote on- yeah, we're not
Don't
done.
do that. That's a
That's the
separate,
next
that's a
agenda.
separate issue.
Oh, well, that's the reason I thought we were coming actually, and that this was.
Well,
just
it's
like-
both. There was
Oh,
two
okay.
reasons.
yes.
I just had another question for Roger.
Yeah.
Back in 2001, as a citizen, I came before the council and asked them to adopt the developer disclosure ordinance from New Jersey Common Cause, which they did. It was when you were applying for a D variance, you had to disclose all of your campaign contributions as well as all professionals associated with your project. Is that still enforced or did the state undermine that?
I'm not aware of that particularly, but I can tell you that that when you end up filing an application, the application form generally requires that you end up having, you know, you have to say who the representatives are. You have to indicate who the planner, the attorney, who the consultants are, and where they're from and their address. I don't know if there has been a general enforcement of the fact that, I'm trying to think of.
I've been on the board for 20 years. And I know it was part of the packet that you got when you filed a zoning application to come before us. But I haven't seen one in a lot of years. You know, Chris?
Yeah, the applications that are submitted, Jennifer and Sonia would send it to myself and Bruce for completeness review. We would get those forms. I suppose over the past few years, when it's deemed complete, the forms haven't been submitted to the final package. So I guess the question is, does the board want to see those extra forms? Given that we're going digital, it's less of an issue. Just trying to save on paper costs. It's now a relevant issue. So I could always ask Sonia to make sure, as the packet's put together, the applicants make the PDF or electronic copy.
Thank you, because it was something we passed with the law in Highland Park.
It's been enforced.
Thank you.
And certainly if it's a corporation, you have to disclose shareholders, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a requirement.
The purpose of the ordinance was that it would be passed on merit, not based on money from political contributions
Right.
made by
So,
lawyers, engineers, other associated with projects.
Okay, so we are done with correspondence and reports. The next item on the agenda is appointment of our new board clerk. So Sonia Monroy, so thank you and welcome to the board. I guess we do have to vote. on
yes,
this.
you need to call for a motion and a second, and because it's an action that technically does require some money that is going to be exchanged, you do need to have a roll roll call vote. So you do need a motion and a
I'll
second.
make that motion, Rob, to adopt zoning.
Second.
Okay, there's a first and a second. And then I guess any further discussion on it? Otherwise, we will do a roll call vote on this motion. So,
Roll call?
yeah, you call it roll.
Mr. Fetcher,
Yes.
Mr. Pheasant,
Yes.
Mr. Hofer,
Yes.
Mr. Holzapfel,
Yes.
Ms. Corbin.
Yes.
Mr. Rothberg, Mr. Winfrey,
Yes.
Mr. Rossman.
Yes. Congratulations.
Just for the,
Thank
for
you.
purposes of the record, I think that that should just be recorded in the minutes. I don't think there's a need to do a formal resolution, which again is just generating costs for no good reason.
I fully agree. One less thing to read. Okay, so that's it. Any other final discussion? Anybody else in the public? We don't have to give a second round.
No.
of Public comment on this board, so that window has come and gone, if anyone's out there still. Mr. Hale, any comments or thoughts, or otherwise I'll make them entertain a motion for adjournment.
I so move.
Come on, there's got to be a second.
I
right?
second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you all. Quick meeting.
There you go.
Thank you.
Very efficient.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
That's-
Yeah.